Robert Genrick had an absolute nightmare of an interview round yesterday. First, it started with Lewis Goodall on LBC, where Jenrick tried to pitch himself as the moral compass of British politics. Problem is, well, it's his own record, isn't it? He was hammered over his silence over the past lockdown scandals and dodged repeated questions on why ministers who broke the rules weren't held to account. You can't call for higher standards when you've spent the years looking in the opposite direction.
Look, I think our prisons are in a perilous position right now, and I'm warning that unless the government do act, step up, we're going to see a prison officer get killed or held hostage or a terrorist attack planned from within a prison. And don't just take my word for it. This is something that the Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor himself, has said months ago when he warned that drones could be used to take weapons, explosives, knives into prisons, hand them to our most dangerous prisoners like Islamist extremists, and use them against the brave men and women who work in our prisons.
Oh, and so Genrich is suddenly worried about drones being used to smuggle weapons into prisons, as if this was some shocking new development. Funny how Liz Truss was talking about it 7 years ago, and her solution was, well, it was dogs. Literal dogs to scare off drones. All right, yeah, I know it's crazy, sure, but at least it was a plan.
I was at HMP Pentonville last week. They've now got patrol dogs who are barking, which helps deter drones. So we're using all kinds of solutions to deal with contraband coming into our prison.
What contribution do you think the Conservatives' reduction in police numbers per capita and our overcrowded, overflowing prisons have contributed to that overall picture of lawlessness?
Well, look, we could have done more. We did actually leave police numbers at record levels.
Not per capita.
When we left
6%
office.
down on where they were.
Well, there were more police officers than there'd ever been in our country's history. But could we have done more? Yes, of course we could have done. But what we need to focus on now is what this government is doing and to make constructive suggestions as to how they can get things into a better place.
And do you think the public realm started going downhill, Robert Genrick? Do you think it started in July 2024?
I think this has been going on for a long time. It's something I've been interested in for a long time.
So we should blame you and your colleagues then?
No, I think that these things have been happening for some time. As Housing Secretary, I got investment for smaller towns and communities and town centres precisely because I was worried about parts of our country where things were starting to deteriorate.
Has anyone ever accosted you in the street for unlawfully approving a Conservative-supporting billionaire housing project which could have cost the taxpayer £45 million? Rule breaking is a problem wherever it happens, isn't it?
Well, you're talking about something that happened 5 years ago, which I was cleared of then. What matters now to the people listening, what matters now to the people listening to your programme is how we tackle crime. And that is what I'm focused on. And I don't think it's right that you're letting out people on sentences, a third of their sentence. That's pathetic.
Were you equally incensed when Boris Johnson and half of Downing Street were fined for breaking lockdown rules? Did you accost them about it in Downing Street or in the Cabinet?
Look, Lewis, you seem to be decrying these things that are happening right now in our country. You're trying to deflect from them.
Well, you just say anything that happens in the past doesn't matter. It does matter, doesn't it? Just because it's happened in the
Lewis,
past.
what you're doing here is trying to deflect from the campaigns that I and others are running to tackle crime in our country right now. And that might be what matters to you and the people you hang out with in Westminster and the sort of liberal bubble that you live in. But out there in the country, the people who I represent are appalled at prisoners.
So you don't think rule breaking at the top is a problem? It's only a problem for those at the bottom?
No, you said that. I didn't say that.
Well, no, that is the logical corollary of what you're saying. Because it happened years ago, it doesn't matter.
We are actually tackling crime in our country. You seem to be more interested in deflecting and talking about other stuff.
You don't think there's a connection between people seeing rule breaking at the top, for example, what happened with Boris Johnson during lockdown, and indeed what happened with you acting unlawfully with Desmond, and then going, you know what, I don't think I'll act within the rules because they don't at the top. You don't think there's any connection between those things?
Look, I don't condone anything, but what I'm saying is the public are much more interested in what's happening right now in our country.
Then came Times Radio, where Adam Boulton gave him a grilling over prison extremism. Genrick's solution is to equip officers with stun grenades and guns inside of prisons, turning UK jails into a SWAT training ground or something. Boulton pressed hard on the real-world risks, but Genrick had no clear answers. The policy sounded reactive, desperate and untethered from reality, like someone playing politics with public safety.
Kemi Badenoch was on Times Radio yesterday speaking to Rod Liddle, in which she said you are doing exactly what she tells you to do. Is that true?
Well, I'm doing my job as Shadow Justice Secretary, working alongside Kemi as our leader.
The reason why I ask is because you've just said we need to cut welfare further. Kemi Badenoch is in the papers this morning saying that she is going to vote against, the Conservatives are going to vote against the planned welfare cuts. Are you going to join in that?
No, Kemi Badenoch has said that we are going to vote against the planned welfare cuts because they don't go further enough. We want to get the welfare bill right down, and just this week we hear that in fact it's going to start rising again.
But if you want to cut welfare, either you want to cut welfare like you told me, or you don't, and you're going to vote against it.
No, we're voting against proposals because they don't go far enough.
A lot of people might be confused, saying you want to cut welfare and yet you're going to vote against welfare cuts, but mightn't they? But let's leave it at that.
We are not proposing, let's be clear, that prison officers walk the wings carrying weapons. We're saying that if, as has been predicted by Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, there is a hostage situation in a prison or the life of a prison officer is put in direct danger, then there is a secure armoury on the site of that maximum security jail where the officers can go, specialist officers, to access those weapons. What happens today, let's understand what would happen today, is that weapons would get into the prison, but that the prison would have to wait minutes, maybe even hours, for those specialist officers to arrive in order to regain control of the prison. That is not acceptable.
Well, it's exactly the same. I mean, what you're proposing is exactly the same. You know, if an incident happens and then people have to run off to a cupboard to get the weapons, I mean, it's not going to prevent the incident happening, is it?
So you're seriously suggesting that instead of having a secure armoury and specialist officers who are trained to handle this situation, it would be better to continue with the present situation.
No, what I'm asking you about is
who might take an hour to arrive. Look, you may have scant regard for the lives of our prison officers, but I don't. But I want to have their backs. Well, and they're facing ever-increasing dangers right now.
It's not about my view, and please don't cast aspersions. What I'm saying to you is, if people aren't actually carrying the weapons at the time, it's not going to stop these sort of distressing incidents taking place, is it?
Well, it enables the governors to regain control swiftly.
Is your action would introduce dangerous weapons into the circumstances post-fact. And in all those distressing instances you've cited, they happened anyway. As I understand it, people would not be armed, so they would still be victims of that. And thereafter, there might be a reaction, but in all those cases, it appears that the authorities did gain control in any case. So this is, you know, dare I say, gesture politics.
No, it's certainly not.
And then, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Genrich waded into the defence spending debate, parroting tired talking points about raising the UK's military budget to 3%. He claimed Labour wouldn't commit to it, despite Labour already making clear they supported the increased investment in defence. Once again, he tried to score points, but stumbled over the facts. The result? One day, 3 interviews, 0 wins. Jenrick is trying to reinvent himself as the hard-edged, no-nonsense Tory, but each media appearance peeled back that image to reveal a politician struggling to defend the past, floundering in the present, and unconvincing about the future. It's clear that he's on manoeuvres, trying to show the Conservative grassroots that he's the leader they should have chosen, in an attempt to set himself up for the next Tory leadership race, whenever that happens. But all he's really doing at the moment is just showing how weak Kemi is for not being able to sack him, and that the Conservatives haven't learned anything from their last general election beating, and they're still fighting amongst themselves like rats stuck in a sack. It wasn't just a bad day for him, it's actually a warning sign. If the question now is Kemi's time as leader nearly up? The answer they're looking for certainly isn't Robert Jenrick. But it's not just Robert Jenrick that has car crash interviews. In the video that's on screen now, he's joined by 2 of his fellow Conservatives in what makes just really cringeworthy watching. So go watch that next, and don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you for watching.